and clouds ruin their plans. Total failure.
Not only does Campbell fail to get his photograph, but he is forced to abandon his state-of-the-art equipment. Because he is an American, Campbell is not arrested, but he leaves for home a defeated man.
Campbell says one wants to come home by the back door and see nobody.
Einstein in Berlin is shattered.
The expeditions are failures. Freundlich and his team spend several months as prisoners of war in Russia. For Einstein, it is a disaster. Proof of his most revolutionary theory, general relativity, is slipping between his fingers. The outbreak of World War I leaves Einstein's Russian eclipse expedition in shambles and threatens to further obscure the long-sought proof of the relativity theory on which Einstein has labored for years.
The war killed communication between scientists. The open exchange of ideas was gone overnight.
Ties were cut.
Once the United States joins the war, astronomer William Campbell sees things differently.
Campbell dedicated himself to the eclipse problem, independently of his former colleague from Germany, who he now viewed as the enemy.
In Berlin, the whole atmosphere changed. When Einstein looked out of his window, he would see a lot of patriotism. In his eyes, a whole nation went crazy.
All of Einstein's expectations of the kind of city he was going to live in disappear. They're gone.
Hundreds of thousands of German young men marched enthusiastically.
His best colleagues, Planck and Haber, were enthusiastic about the war.
His close friend Fritz Haber, like Einstein, was born German and Jewish.
Fritz Haber converted to Christianity, and he tried to assimilate as much as possible. One of his great moments of pride when he actually received a commission in the German army. Really almost unheard of award for a converted Jew. Einstein saw this as ridiculous. Haber said, "I'm a chemist. I understand the chemistry of the chlorine atom very well. I know that chlorine gas is poisonous. Can I turn this into a useful weapon?" Haber felt he could construct a devastating enough weapon that it would end the war quickly, thus a humane outcome.
The institute Haber directs is turned into testing gas to be deployed on the Western Front. Einstein has an office in Haber's institute.
Einstein was disgusted by the eagerness with which Haber, first amongst his colleagues, but many of his colleagues, went looking for ways to kill people and kill them more effectively.
Haber was one of the first to develop terrible weapons out of the potential of science.
Early in the war, Haber's new mystery weapon, poison gas, is tested on a Belgian battlefield.
Haber was there and said, "Release the weapon." This low cloud drifted over the battlefield, and the cloud just sort of forms. This was the first time this ever happened. Troops had seen things that looked much worse than this cloud, and the effect was devastating. I mean, the troops were just blown out of their trenches.
Haber saw thousands of people die, thousands of soldiers, about 5,000 soldiers.
Your lungs begin to fill with fluid, and as the deterioration of your body continues, you can lie there on dry ground, in effect drowning. Albert Einstein takes a look at his close friend and his, intimate professional colleague and says, in effect, "You're pathological. This is grotesque." He writes a letter to a friend in Switzerland that says, "All our supposed technological progress is like an axe in the hands of a madman."
Haber never resented it. And it's so strange that he befriended Einstein so closely. They were living on different planets.
The war posed a big dilemma for Einstein because in his personal relationships he respected and was even fond of his colleagues, but rejected their wholehearted support of the war.
He comes across this very publicly hyped and published document called the Manifesto of '93, signed by 93 leading German academics, including the people who brought him to Berlin and the people he most values, Haber, and above all, Max Planck. The manifesto says Germany had to fight, it was justified and morally acceptable to fight in this war. And this shocked Einstein. In effect, a betrayal. This was the moment when Einstein realized that there were some things about life outside physics that were important enough that he had to actually go out on a limb and take some personal risk to defend. He actually tries to present a counter-manifesto of other German academics who say, no, there's something else out there besides national pride, national competitiveness, national fury. And 4 people signed the manifesto. It goes nowhere, never published, it fails.
He becomes a pacifist, he becomes a war resistor.
And Einstein was nearly alone.
He's isolated. He's being rejected by his colleagues. His marriage is breaking up. He's having a custody battle for his kids. He immerses himself in his science.
The isolation has a positive outcome as Einstein looks again at his general relativity theory. He refocuses on the mathematical equations.
One day, he looked back at the calculation for the bending of light as it goes around the sun, and he suddenly realized his earlier calculation was wrong.
What would have been found had Freundlich done the observation was only half the deflection that's there, half the bending of the sunlight.
It would have discredited Einstein's theory.
It is an embarrassing but serendipitous discovery. For 3 years, Einstein has been urging astronomers to photograph an eclipse, which would prove an equation that he now believes to be wrong. Einstein has always considered the failed eclipse expeditions to be setbacks. In fact, they may have saved his career. The war raging all around him, the physicist retreats to his study.
He had a little apartment, and most of his thinking was done in his study.
Sometimes he can't quite visualize the curving of space, and what he does is he takes out his violin. He said that Mozart's music captured the harmonies of the universe. Playing the violin would help him think.
Einstein had this prodigious ability to sit and think. It was called Sitzfleisch. People who knew him said he had this remarkable Sitzfleisch where he can concentrate on a problem for hours, for days, even years.
In his office are lots of mathematical manuscripts with equations all over. And he's sitting there thinking, walking around, standing deep in thought. He's doing pure mathematics in his mind.
Science is done by the seat of your pants. We have leaps of logic. We have years of wandering in the wilderness. We have frustration. We have pulling our hairs out. That is really the power of genius, the force of will to make all the mistakes necessary to get the right answer.
There was never a moment of, oh no, I'm not going to have a theory. That, because of his ego, I don't think it ever occurred to him. He's not going to have a theory.
What matters is you keep your eye on the prize.
For Einstein, that prize is the Nobel, proceeds of which he has promised to Mileva and his 2 sons. In 1915, he's asked to present his general theory of relativity at a prestigious forum to the most important German scientists. Einstein accepts. But after 8 years of work, his theory still has 2 major problems. It's completely unproven, and the math appears to be flawed. After nearly a decade of work, Einstein's general theory of relativity is still far from finished. His math is wrong, and without the correct calculation, his theory can't be proven. And now, he's scheduled to deliver a paper to the most prestigious scientific gathering in Germany.
Prussian Academy, it's a very formal place.